The third amendment that I've introduced on the NDAA that I want to address is the Expatriate Terrorist Act. It's a bill that I introduced over a year ago and have now filed as an amendment to the NDAA. As we all know, radical Islamic terrorists have been waging war against the United States since, and indeed well before, 9/11. And yet the president cannot bring himself to identify the enemy, preferring instead to use meaningless bureaucratic terms like violent extremists. The president naively believes that refraining from calling the threat what it is, radical Islamic terrorism, will somehow assuage the terrorists and discourage them from making war against us and our allies. But that hasn't stopped ISIS from promising to strike America over and over and over again. Nor did it dissuade the radical Islamic terrorists here in the United States who have committed attacks against Americans since this president first took office. The terrorist attack in Fort Hood, which the administration inexplicably tried to categorize as workplace violence. The Boston Marathon bombing. The terrorist attacks on military recruiters in Little Rock and Chattanooga. And most recently, the horrific attack in San Bernardino. The question for us in Congress is whether we have given the government every possible tool consistent with the Constitution to defeat this threat. I do not believe we have, which is why I've introduced the Expatriate Terrorist Act. Over the years, numerous Americans like Jose Padilla, Anwar al-Awlaki, and Faisal Shahzad, just to name a few, have abandoned their country and their fellow citizens to go abroad and to join radical Islamic terrorist groups. Intelligence officials estimate more than 250 Americans have tried or succeeded in traveling to Syria and Iraq to join ISIS or other terrorist groups in the region. This amendment updates the expatriate statute so that Americans travel abroad and who to fight with radical Islamic terrorists can relinquish their citizenship. This allows us to preempt any attack, preempt any attempt to re-enter the country and launch attacks on Americans who otherwise hide behind the privilege of citizenship. In this more and more dangerous world, it would be the height of foolishness for the administration to allow known terrorists, radical Islamic terrorists, those affiliated with ISIS, with Al-Qaeda, with other Islamist groups, to travel back to the United States of America using a passport to carry out jihad and murder innocent Americans. This legislation should be bipartisan legislation. This legislation should be legislation that brings all of us together. We might disagree on the questions of marginal tax rates as Democrats and Republicans. We might disagree on a host of policy issues. But when it comes to the simple question, should an Islamic terrorist intent on killing Americans be allowed to use a U.S. passport to travel freely and come into America, that answer should be no. And that ought to be an issue of great agreement. So today I call upon my colleagues to join me in supporting these amendments and coming together. Together, these amendments strengthen our nation both at home and abroad. We are stronger than the obstacles we face. And by the grace of God, we will succeed. The stakes are too high to quit. And we will stand together and continue to strengthen this exceptional nation, this shining city on a hill that each and every one of us love. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.